If you are a little older like I am, you will remember a time when the only way of communication, apart from face-to-face, was a telephone or a telegraph, in your home. You might have two if you were lucky, but we used to get out information from books, newspapers, encyclopedias, libraries, and so forth. We used to spend more time in the real world, and being at home used to be more of a punishment. It feels as if in the last quarter of a century, we spend more and more of our lives on a screen, and the smaller the screen seems to become, the larger the world within it has become. As kids, we used to get home, throw our books on the floor and head for the door, because entertainment was outside. If someone told me that I would be able to have the answers to almost anything on a device so small I can hold it in my hands when I was a teenager, I would have laughed, but the truth is without my phone, I am lost. Granted, if I struggle with something on my device, I have to ask someone several decades younger to help me, because the access and technology is growing so fast that it makes me feel old. The world is developing faster than I can keep up with, but I have to admit, there are some benefits. Everyone I love and care about is now just a couple of clicks away, and I don't have to dial anywhere if I want to do research for something. It's allowed me to work from home, and where a video store would only be able to offer a limited choice for my twisted taste, I am now spoilt in my selection of categories of entertainment. As with everything, there is also the bad and the ugly side of this new world called the internet we have now become accustomed to. Criminals seem to be just like you and me. I am not ashamed to admit that I am ever so slightly addicted to the internet, and especially for social media apps. Imagine a young dude with no obvious generational wealth or job description who flashes his jewelry, designer clothing, and doing it all while sitting in a car worth more than most of us make in a lifetime. I always wonder where the money comes from and when either the cops or the taxman is going to ask the same. It's the most stupid mistake many criminals make. Showing their crimes on the internet. Unfortunately, since about 2016, there is another problematic feature used in the commission of crimes, which is live streaming. From kids who steal ice cream to mass murders, there is a definite rise in the crimes that are streamed in real time to the world. Audiences range from anywhere between a handful to thousands, but I believe the impact of a murder that you know you are watching in real time is the same on your psyche as if you were there in the flesh. I like to see who is doing what, and because I am an introvert, the internet feels like the best way for me to communicate. I am pretty sure most first world countries have at least a small unit that monitors the content we so love to share, because criminals just love to share their crimes on the World Wide Web. In today's episode, I will be telling you about a young man who used the internet to commit crime. English is my first language, and I will try my best, but certain sounds are so indicative to the tribe or the nationality that unless you are born with a tongue that can make those sounds from childhood, it's almost impossible to do it as an adult. I mean no disrespect, and I still believe their stories are worth sharing. Today's story is about the Vlakfontein murders. We begin this episode with a case from sunny and dysfunctional South Africa, which is a diverse and complicated landscape with an overwhelming amount of violence. Still, the people who live there and who are just trying to give their children a reasonably good enough life, with a roof over the head and a little food in the belly, are usually salt of the earth people, despite the overwhelming crime and violence that surrounds them. Vlakfontein is a settlement about an hour outside of Johannesburg and for the most part, The people there, although desperately poor, are just trying to raise their children to the best of their abilities. It's a community of hard-working people, but like the rest of the country, being a victim of a robbery or a rape is a daily reality. The houses are humble and for the most part tidy and as well maintained as the owner's pocket can allow. Today's crimes began with a Facebook message from a stranger to the Corsa family, who called Vlakfontein their home. In 2018, Vlakfontein was a working-class area and the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. In 412, Ives Crescent, a family lived whose lives would be destroyed by a common conman. It's a small house with a metal gate and there are a number of people who call it home. The occupants of the little house were Karabal, who was 13 years old, Uyanda, who was 7 years old and Sabongakonk, who was 3 years old, who were the children in the house. The adults were Amanda Mbali, who was the owner of the home, and Duduzil. All were related. Mbali also had a long-term boyfriend called Piatar who lived on the property. This was one big family, sharing the house they called home. The advantage was that they could split the costs and childcare duties. In South Africa, it's not an uncommon tradition to all live in a house and support those who need in it. There was also a backroom that the family rented out for extra income. Andre Kossa was such a tenant at the address we are discussing. Please don't confuse it with the Kossa surname of the family who occupied the main house. Andre's room was at the back of the property, so there was no need for him to go through the house or have interactions with the tenants. It was however Andre who became concerned when, especially near the end of the month and after a couple of weeks, he had not seen or heard from any of them. The children were not playing in the yard and the normal household noises were silent. There also seemed to be a terrible smell coming from the house that was rapidly becoming too intense to ignore. He tried not to be too worried. After all, Sibusiso Corsa, who was a recent addition to the household, was still around and going in and out of the house. Sibusiso stayed in one of the back rooms and Peter, the homeowner's boyfriend, was also around the property as if all is well. Peter eventually told Andre that the entire family, woman, and the children, were on a trip to Durban and that he had just returned from a trip to Zimbabwe. Andre also asked Sibusiso about the smell, but he told Andre that they had used poison to kill some rats. Andre was not buying it. How many rats were killed to stink up the place so badly, and where were all the people that gave the house its essence of life? In an interview with Drum magazine, one of the cousins who were not living in the house relays how she struggled to get hold of her kin. Her name was Linky and she had received a strange message that Mbali and the rest of the family were traveling to the coast. But when she tried to call any of them back, their phones were off and no one was answering her back. Linky was very concerned. South Africa is a dangerous country, so she goes to the home on the 29th of October, 2019 to see for herself what is going on. There is no clarity about how they entered the home. Some sources say a neighbor broke in, while others say the cops gained entry to the home. Linky did have to climb over the wire fence, and once they gained entry to the house, everyone was hit with a smell so bad they immediately had to leave. It was the smell of rotten flesh and flies were buzzing all over. Peter arrived and the bizarre and horrifying scene is something reserved for horror movies. Two of the rooms in the house, including the main bedroom, were covered in red sand and flies. I am not telling you about a little dust that had gathered with time. High heaps of sand was in both rooms. All the belongings like the curtains and chairs were still in place amongst the sand that was piled feet high. In the sand, the decomposing bodies of all the children and women were buried with parts protruding. 3 victims were in one room and 4 were buried like this in another. The victims showed signs of both blunt force trauma and sharp object penetration. 7 members of the family were murdered and then buried with sand in the house with wheelbarrow loads of sand. There are witnesses who would testify that they saw him going in and out of the house with the sand. He even asked the little kids in the neighborhood to bring him buckets of sand. Sibusiso had also tried to use cleaning fluid and bleach to get rid of the smell by pouring it on the sand. He also bought air freshener and a product called Doom, which is used to keep flies away and kill insects. It appears that the last time any of the family members were seen was about the 18th or the 19th of October, which means that the bodies had been there for at least 10 days. Ironically, Peter had been living for at least 3 days in the home, going about his business. He never once asked about why the rooms were locked or where the terrible smell was coming from. People such as journalists and the neighbors described the smell as unbearable, and no one was able to go near the house as a result of the putrid smell. The smell lingered in the neighborhood and down the street long after the bodies had been removed. Peter was a 61-year-old man who was in a relationship with Mbali. However, Sibusiso Kosa was a bit of a mystery. Peter had been in a relationship with the house owner for about 15 years, but Sibusiso was new on the scene. He had apparently contacted the family through Facebook and made the claim that he was their long-lost half-brother. The aunts knew their father lived a nomadic lifestyle to be able to provide for the family, and it was not a surprise to discover a close relative they had never heard of before. At the time of the murders, he had only been living there for 3 months. He was well liked during his short time there and claimed to be the son of a deceased uncle. He also claimed to be a doctor by profession and said that he had even worked in New York. Thank you for watching Chapter 1 of the Vlakfontein murders. Please join us for Chapter 2 here on our channel. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe if you have not already.